Dean Martin's putter isn't moving. His hands are steady, his breathing is calm, his white golf shirt is soaked through with Palm Springs sweat, but his grip on the club is loose, relaxed, like this is just another Saturday afternoon. It's August 15th, 1964, 108 degrees, the 7th hole at Tamarisk Country Club. His manager is sprinting across the fairway. Mort Viner, 63 years old with a bad hip. Mort never runs, but right now he's running like his life depends on it. "Dean," Mort gasps. "Billboard just called." Dean doesn't look up, doesn't change his stance, doesn't react at all. "You're number one." 16 years ago, they told Dean Martin this song was dead, too slow, too old-fashioned. Nobody wants a love song anymore. They were wrong. What Dean said next would become the most famous non-reaction in music history. But first, you need to understand why this moment meant everything, and why Dean Martin pretended it meant nothing. To understand why August 15th, 1964 changed everything, you have to go back to a recording studio in 1948. Dean Martin was 31 years old, still half of Martin and Lewis. But he wanted more. He wanted to be taken seriously. So he walked into Capitol Records with a song. Everybody Loves Somebody. Dean recorded it in 3 takes. He knew it was special. The label executives listened. Then they killed it. Too slow, too old-fashioned. Nobody wants a love song anymore. They shelved the recording, and Dean walked out with a rejection that would burn for 16 years. In Steubenville, Ohio, young Dino Crocetti would sit by the radio and listen to Bing Crosby sing. His father would say in broken English, "That man is the king. Nobody can touch him." Dino believed it. Everyone believed it. Tommy Russo was a recording engineer at United Recording Studios, 28 years old. The session in 1964 would change his life. "I knew something was happening," Tommy would say decades later. "The air felt electric, like we were making history." But history doesn't happen overnight. It takes 16 years of waiting. The smell of stale cigarettes and bourbon, the hum of fluorescent lights, the feel of cold studio air against sweaty palms. Jimmy Bowen took it all in. His heart was pounding. This was either the smartest thing he'd ever done or the end of his career. Jimmy Bowen was 26 years old. Frank Sinatra had hired him to run Reprise Records' pop division. In early 1964, Jimmy walked into Dean's dressing room at the Sands. Dean was watching golf on television. He didn't look up when Jimmy entered. He didn't offer a drink. He didn't even acknowledge the kid standing in his doorway. "Dean, I want to re-record Everybody Loves Somebody." Dean's eyes stayed on the television. A golfer was lining up a putt. "That song is dead, kid. They buried it in '48. They were wrong." Now Dean looked at him. His jaw tightened. "What makes you think this time is different?" Jimmy smiled. It wasn't a cocky smile. It was the smile of a man who had nothing to lose. "Because this time, I'm producing it." Dean didn't say yes, but he didn't say no. The recording session was April 1964, United Recording Studios, 10 p.m., a 40-piece orchestra, Ernie Freeman conducting. Tommy Russo was at the mixing board, his hands steady despite the sweat dripping down his back. Dean showed up at 9:45, golf shirt and slacks. He looked like he was heading to the country club, not making history. "Let's do this quick," Dean said. "I've got a tee time in the morning." 3 takes. Dean nailed it on the first one. The second was insurance. The third was perfection. After the 3rd take, Dean put down his headphones. "That's it. I'm done." He walked out without hearing the playback. Didn't ask what Jimmy thought. Didn't wait for applause. He just left. Jimmy Bowen sat in the control room listening to the playback. Tommy Russo was next to him. Neither of them spoke for a full minute. "My God," Jimmy whispered. "This is going to change everything." Tommy nodded, but there was something in his eyes. Fear. Because he knew what they were up against, and he wasn't sure the world was ready. Frank Sinatra owned Reprise Records. When Jimmy played him the recording, Frank listened in silence. His cigarette burned down to the filter. He didn't move. When the song ended, he stubbed out the cigarette and looked at Jimmy. "It's good, but it's not rock and roll. The kids want the Beatles. They don't want a love song from a guy who's almost 50. "Trust me," Jimmy said. Frank shook his head. "I hope you're right. Because if this flops, Dean's finished. And so are you." The single was released in June 1964. The same month the Beatles released A Hard Day's Night. The same month Beatlemania was sweeping the nation. Nobody gave Dean a chance. The Crooners were dead. The future belonged to Liverpool. But something strange happened. The song didn't disappear. It climbed, slowly at first, then faster, week after week. By August it was in the top 10, and then, on August 15, 1964, Dean Martin was on a golf course in Palm Springs when his manager found him. What happened next took less than a minute, but it changed everything. Dean was lining up a putt on the 7th hole. The Palm Springs sun was brutal, 108 degrees. His white golf shirt was soaked through. The ball sat 6 feet from the cup, an easy putt, the kind he'd made 1,000 times. His manager, Mort Viner, came running across the fairway. Running. Mort never ran. Mort was 63 years old with a bad hip and a worse heart. But there he was, sprinting across the green like a man half his age. "Dean," Mort said, gasping for air. His face was red. His hands were shaking. "Billboard just called." Dean waited. He didn't look up from the ball, didn't change his stance, didn't react at all. "You're number 1. The words hung in the air. The other golfers stopped. The caddies froze. Even the birds seemed to go silent. Dean didn't react. He looked at the golf ball, looked at the hole, looked at the palm trees swaying in the hot wind. 16 years. 16 years since they told him the song was dead. 16 years since Capitol Records said nobody wanted a love song anymore. 16 years of being called a has-been, a crooner, a relic of a bygone era. 16 years of watching the world move on while he stayed exactly where he was. And now? Dean looked at the golf ball. White, round, simple. Just like the song, just like everything he did. No flash, no gimmicks, just the thing itself, pure and clean. He lined up his shot. "Which song?" Dean asked. Mort stared at him. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Which? Dean, everybody loves somebody. You just knocked the Beatles off number 1. A crooner hasn't done that in years. You just—" Dean held up his hand, the hand that wasn't holding the putter, the hand that was perfectly steady. "Mort." "Yes?" Dean pulled back the putter, smooth, easy, the stroke he'd practiced 10,000 times. The ball rolled across the green. It caught the edge of the cup, hesitated, then dropped. Dean looked at his manager. His face was blank. The king of cool. The mask that had taken 47 years to perfect. And then he said 5 words. 5 words that would be repeated for the next 60 years. "I knew it wasn't dead." He said it quietly, almost a whisper, like he was telling Mort a secret. Like this moment that everyone else would call the greatest triumph of his career, was just another putt on a Saturday afternoon. He picked up his ball and walked to the 8th tee. Mort stood there, frozen. The biggest moment in Dean Martin's career, the validation of everything he had worked for. And Dean was walking to the next hole. "Dean," Mort called out, "don't you want to celebrate? Don't you want to call someone? Frank, the label, anyone?" Dean didn't turn around. "I'm doing something. I'm finishing my round." But Mort saw something, just for a second, before Dean turned away completely. A tremble in his hand, the hand holding the putter, the hand that had been perfectly steady 30 seconds ago. The king of cool wasn't as cool as he pretended. He just didn't want anyone to see. Tommy Russo heard the news that afternoon. He was at home in his apartment in Studio City, eating a sandwich and watching a baseball game. When the radio announcer interrupted the game to announce that Dean Martin had hit number 1, Tommy sat down heavily on his couch. "We did it," he whispered to no one. "The bastard said it was dead, and we did it anyway." He thought about that night in the studio, the 3 takes, Dean walking out without even listening, the complete, absolute confidence of a man who didn't need anyone to tell him what he already knew. "That's when I understood Dean Martin," Tommy would say years later. He didn't need to hear it. He didn't need anyone to validate him. He knew. He always knew. The song wasn't dead. It was just waiting for the world to catch up. The news hit Hollywood like an earthquake. Dean Martin, the crooner everyone had written off, the sidekick, The second banana. For the first time since the British invasion began, a crooner was back on top. The phone in Dean's house rang for 3 days straight. He didn't answer it. Jeannie, his wife, took messages. Frank called 7 times. Sammy called 12. Jack Warner called so many times that Jeannie finally stopped counting. Dean spent those 3 days on the golf course. 3 days after the Billboard announcement, Bing Crosby called. Dean was home this time, sitting in his den, watching television. He picked up the phone on the 4th ring. "Dean," Bing said. His voice was warm, but there was something underneath. Something that might have been sadness. Or maybe it was relief. The relief of a man who had carried a crown for 22 years and finally had permission to set it down. "I wanted to congratulate you. That's a hell of a song." "Thank you, Bing. It means a lot coming from you." There was a long pause. The kind of pause that carries weight. That says everything words can't. "I always thought that record would stand forever," Bing said slowly. Dean thought about his father. The barbershop in Steubenville. The little radio that sat on the counter. The reverence in his father's voice when Bing Crosby sang. "Bing," Dean said quietly, "you're still the king. I just borrowed the crown for a while." Bing laughed, but it was a hollow laugh, the laugh of a man who knew better. "You're a class act, Dean. Always were." Everybody Loves Somebody, a hit #1. It became one of the best-selling singles of 1964. Dean had done it. He had proven everyone wrong. You might think that's where the story ends. A victory lap, a celebration, a man who finally got what he deserved. But Dean Martin wasn't thinking about triumph. He was thinking about a recording studio in 1948, about a song that got shelved, about 16 years of hearing the word no. And he was thinking about his father, who died in 1967 without ever knowing how much those afternoons by the radio had shaped his son's entire life. Tommy Russo lived until 2019. He was 93 years old. He never stopped working in music, but he never worked on another song that mattered as much as that one. In his last interview, a music historian asked him about that recording session. What made Dean different? Tommy thought for a long time. His hands were spotted with age, his voice was thin, but his eyes were sharp. Everyone else needed the audience to tell them they were good. Elvis needed the screams, Frank needed the applause, the Beatles needed the hysteria. But Dean knew he was good. He didn't need anyone's permission. And breaking Bing's record? Tommy smiled. Dean didn't break anyone's record. He just showed up, did the work, walked away, and the world finally paid attention. We all have dreams that die young, songs that get shelved, ideas the world says are too old, too slow, too late. We all hear the word no and wonder if maybe they're right. Maybe the song really is dead. Maybe we really should give up. Dean Martin heard those voices for 16 years, and then he proved them wrong with 3 minutes and 14 seconds of music. In Steubenville, there's a street named after Dean Martin now, Dean Martin Boulevard. It runs through the center of town, past the spot where his father's barbershop used to stand. The barbershop is gone. The radio that played Bing Crosby is gone. The father who said, "That man is the king," is gone. But the song remains, and every time it plays, somewhere a kid hears it. A kid who's been told their dreams are too old-fashioned, that nobody wants what they're selling, that the world has moved on. And maybe that kid thinks, if Dean Martin could wait 16 years, maybe I can wait too. 1948. Dean records Everybody Loves Somebody. Rejected. 1964. Dean records it again. #1. 16 years, 5,840 days. That's how long Dean Martin held onto a song the world said was dead. And when the world finally caught up, what did Dean do? He finished his golf game. We all measure success by moments of triumph. The #1s, the standing ovations, the headlines. But Dean Martin measured it differently, by the putt he sank on the 7th hole, by the quiet moments when he didn't need anyone to tell him he was good, by the 16 years of patience that everyone else called failure. That's the real lesson. The song didn't change Dean Martin. Dean Martin was always the same. The world just finally noticed. Everybody Loves Somebody. 3 minutes, 14 seconds. That's all it takes to change everything. But first, you have to believe. For 16 years if necessary. The kid from Steubenville didn't just meet the king, he became one.